Three things in life are certain: death, taxes, and foreigners not understanding how taxes work in Colombia. But hopefully by the end of this video, the third one won't apply to you anymore. I've scheduled an interview with tax attorney Mauricio, and in this video, we're going to be educating you on everything you need to know about tax in Colombia. All right, Mauricio, thank you so much for being on with me today so you can educate all us expats about tax in Colombia. First of all, let's get into the main question of who actually needs to pay tax.
Tax liability itself, it's determined upon two aspects. One, if you're a tax resident in Colombia, and secondly, if you have Colombian source income. That means if one part of your income has a Colombian source. Those two criteria makes you be liable for taxes in Colombia in general terms.
First thing is tax residency. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So for tax residency, it's regardless if you're a Colombian national or not, if you have a visa or not. If you live in Colombia for over 183 days, that's continuous or discontinuous within a 365-day period, you are considered a tax resident. When we say a 365-day period, we're not referring to a calendar day or calendar year. I'm sorry. Our tax authority, they can just take any 365-day period. They can say, okay, so from June 1st of 2023 to June 1st of 2024, how many days were you in Colombia? If in that period you were over 183 days, you're a tax resident. When you think about 183 days, don't think 183 days, first of all, continuous. No, it could be discontinuous. If you come and go from Colombia, that's one thing. And secondly, don't think from January 1st to December 31st.
Let's say I've come in the country June 1st, right?
Yeah.
And then from June 1st, I've spent 183 days. Then what do I do?
In that scenario, you're a tax resident. Now, when you're a tax resident, you're liable in Colombia for your global income, your Colombian source income, and any foreign income that you have.
Let's give it an example. So if I make $50,000 from Australia, $10,000 from Colombia, $60,000, I have to pay tax on all of that?
Yeah, you have to file taxes in Colombia for all of that. The only difference will be if you paid some taxes in Australia, since it's a foreign source income, then Colombia allows you to take the taxes you paid over there as a tax credit. But you still have to file in Colombia for that income.
Now would be a great time in the video, since we're getting a little bit complicated, to say if you actually need some tax advice, you can actually contact Mauricio because he's a tax expert and he knows about all these different treaties and countries and can help you actually with your Colombian taxes. So if you want to get in contact with him, just check the link that I've left in the description, fill out your details, they'll review and they'll get back to you. I've also seen that there's some other type of threshold or limitations for when you need to declare tax. I've seen a few graphics floating around saying that if you earn less than a certain amount, it was around maybe $15,000 or something that I saw, you actually don't have to file. Can you comment on that?
The first thing is, as you mentioned, if you have to file. That's the first question. Now, the second question is, okay, if I'm a tax resident, do I need to file? Well, in Colombia, not all tax residents need to file. The numbers are as follows. If your assets are worth more than 190 million Colombian pesos, that is close to $45,000 of assets, you need to file. That's only one. You don't need to comply all of them. As long as you comply one, you have to file. If your income is more than 59 million Colombian pesos, that, as you said, is close to $15,000. If you earn more than $15,000 of income, you have to file. If you didn't, then you check that criteria. Another one. If your transactions, that means the movements in your bank account, were more than $15,000 within a year, you have to file. Let's say, I don't make money. I just have my parents support me. They give me money. If they put into your bank account more than $15,000 in a year, which is not a lot really, you have to file just because you received the money in your account. If you make purchases, you didn't make any income, but you have the credit card and you make purchases for over $15,000, then you have to file.
So is the net worth of over $45,000 or something like that, income of $15,000, or money that you've been received over $15,000 or spent over $15,000 in 1 year, tax year, then you need to file.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big one that many people don't know.
In many countries, you have to file basically regardless. Like most people file. We don't, because a lot of people here, make low wages. So they don't have to pay any taxes. So that's why our law basically says people that don't comply with these ranges don't even bother filing because you don't have to, you know, pay any taxes.
And what about super wealthy people? Is there any tax like that? Because I know in California, it's called like the millionaire tax or something. Do they have anything like this in Colombia?
Yeah, we do. This is something new. It only started last year, 2023. The translation for that will be tax on wealth. The tax on wealth is if your assets are worth more than, if your net worth, I think is a better term, are worth more than 3.3 billion Colombian pesos, is close to $850,000. If your net worth is more than that, then yeah, you have to pay a tax on wealth. How do you calculate the tax on wealth? The first $850,000 are tax free. Like you don't pay any tax on that. Anything above that, so from 850 to 1.3 million, you have to pay 0.5% on that. And from there on, like up to 1.3 and beyond, you have to pay 1%.
Say I have been determined a tax resident over 183 days, right? You said it's not marked anywhere, it just happens. Do I need to like go and file it? Is that something that we need to do? How does that work here?
The first thing you need to do is to get an RUT or root. That is basically a registration that you do at the tax authority. This is free. This is not something you have to pay for. Some people might charge you because they're gonna help you with it, but tax authority itself does not charge you for this. For you to get a root, all you need is to get an appointment with the tax agent. You can get that appointment physically here in Colombia within the offices that we have, or you can get a virtual appointment. If you get the appointment, you just go and you show your passport or your cédula extranjería, depending on what's your status here. And they basically give you a registration. They ask you for email, name, phone number, address, and so on. When you get your RUT, you're already into the DIAN or tax authority database. Once you do that, you're allowed to go online and you can access your profile within the tax authority website, and there you can file.
So when you say the RUT, that would be like the TIN in the US, right? Tax identification number.
Right. The RUT is a registration. The number is, we call it the NIT or the NIT.
And then the DIAN, DIAN, which is the tax authority in Colombia, is like the IRS in the US.
Exactly, the IRS.
Okay, so now let's get into deductions and credits. What are some common deductions and credits that are available to foreigners living in Medellin or in Colombia?
It depends on what activity you do, how you make your income. If you have a business, of course, you're allowed to take all your expenses, business expenses, costs, because we tax on profits, on revenue, if you have a business. Now, if you make like self-employed or you have a job, now in those cases, you cannot take expenses because you basically don't have any, because you're just employed or you're just having services. But in those cases, you can take deductions such as if you have a dependent, economic dependent. This means maybe a wife or a husband or a child that you support. Then you can take deductions. 10% deduction if you have just at least one economic dependent, and they allow you to take an extra deduction for up to 4 dependents. The more dependents you have, the more deductions you can take. But with only one, you can take 10%. If you have more, then you can take up to like $1,000 per year of deductions per each dependent that you have. Also, if you pay Social Security here, that means if you pay a public healthcare system, if you're affiliated here, you can take that as a deduction. If you pay some extra health insurances, because we have the public healthcare system and we have private health insurance, if you pay that, you can take that as a deduction as well. There are some savings accounts, special savings account that we have, that if you put money in there and leave it for at least 5 years, you can take that as a deduction. And if you're self-employed or you have a job, then we give you like a 25% off, just because if you have like income based upon like royalties, or if you rent an apartment, then you don't have those deductions, because it's passive income. It's money that you made just sitting at your house. So if you have to go and work and sweat your money, then they give
Okay.
you this 25% off as well.
We already covered the process of filing. You have to apply for the IUT, then you get the number, then you log into the portal and have a consultation with a tax person and blah, 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 right? What are the deadlines that we need to be aware of as foreigners or anyone filing tax in Colombia?
In 2024, we filed for the income we received in 2023. From January the 1st to December 31st, an individual, a physical individual, you file between August and October. How do you know which date? Well, we have a calendar, and basically, depending on your NIT, the number, the last two digits start from 00 in August and they go up to 99 in October. Depending on the last two digits of your number, you can check on the Dion's calendar and see what's your deadline for filing.
Are there any penalties for not filing or filing late?
So if you have to file taxes and you file late, our penalty it depends on the taxes you had to pay. So we have a penalty of 5% of the taxes you had to pay for every month or fraction of month that you're late. This means if you're late 1 day, you pay 5%. If you're late 20 days, you still pay 5%. But now if you're late 32 days, then you file 10% penalty. The minimum penalty is what we call 10 UBTs. That is for this year around $110 for the penalty. What does that mean? Well, if let's say your tax, you had to pay only, okay, I only had to pay $1,000 of taxes. So 5% would be like $50, right? Well, unfortunately, in that case, the law says, no, the minimum penalty is 10 UBTs. Regardless if 5% is 50, you have to mark up to $110.
And another question I had that just brought up when we were talking about filing taxes, I know that many expats just like to do things themselves. Like I've seen people just file their own digital nomad visa themselves and things like that. Maybe some people are very resourceful. They speak perfect Spanish. Those type of people, can they just do the whole tax situation themselves, or they still need some kind of tax help?
Under our law, you can do them yourself. You don't have to do them by an attorney or by a CPA. However, we do strongly recommend you to hire an expert because, as I mentioned earlier, the deductions is not something easy to determine. It's not something like so straightforward. Secondly, if you're going to take, let's say, tax credit from foreign sources, then you have to make sure you're eligible for that, because if not, if the DIAN comes and checks your declaration and finds inconsistencies, they can give you a penalty for that. For everything you did wrong, they can give you a penalty. So if you do it yourself, just based upon what you read online, and you do it wrong, you can get still fined for doing it wrong.
So that leads me to the next question. You already talked about making mistakes and getting penalized. What have you seen that are some common tax mistakes that foreigners make when living in Medellin?
One big mistake that I've seen is that in Colombia we have to file what's our net worth. What is our wealth? That doesn't necessarily means you have to pay tax on wealth. They also ask you what's your net worth, what are the value of your assets. They're not gonna tax you on your assets itself, but there's a trick there. The thing is, if the value of your assets from of 2022, let's say, was $100,000. Now in 2023, you said that the value of your assets went up to $300,000. So they increased $200,000. That's one of the biggest mistakes, because if it went up $200,000, if you cannot explain why that happened, then our tax authority can presume that you earned $200,000. Even if you made 50, 60, it doesn't matter, because you said it went up $200,000. So I'm gonna assume that you earned $200,000. So some people just follow that as it was just information that we don't need. But then I start buying, let's say, an apartment, then I bought a car, and then the value of my assets increase, and that can give me a lot of issues, because I can wrongly be taxed upon the increase of my assets. That's one of the main mistakes. To avoid that, the first thing you need to do is to make sure every year, if you're gonna file for the value of your assets, globally, you have to know what you have, because again, as you mentioned earlier, in many countries you don't know that. Like, there's not something you think about when you're filing. You have
Yeah.
to know what's the value that you can put in there.
So we covered the mistakes. Now let's talk about some tax planning. If I had to ask you to give me one tax planning strategy, what would be your number one recommendation, Mauricio?
If people want to start doing tax planning, the first thing is to know, what's your origin of your income, and know how is determined. What does that mean? Well, if you provide services for another country, then in those cases it could be much better to do that under a company than under your individual, as an individual, because in that case you don't have to mix both declarations. So let's say in the US, for example, some people that are sole owners of companies, they can file themselves as if they were the company, right? They make like a single tax declaration. In Colombia, we don't have that. Like, if you have a company files something and you file something totally different. So if you have a company, then you don't have to be thinking of, oh my God, how is that going to affect me personally? Because all of the income of the company stays within the tax declaration of the company. That's one of the main things. And the second thing is for you to know, what benefits you can have. If you know that there's some savings accounts, special savings accounts that can help you plan, then okay, let's put money in there. I mean, I don't have to lose the money, I just have to save it in there. So instead of having it in a regular bank account doing nothing, I'm just putting this savings account, and that helps me save some money in taxes.
All right, so now a big question that I know a lot of people watching this video will be thinking. So I've exceeded 183 days. I'm a tax resident, right? What happens if I just ignore and don't declare tax?
In Colombia, there's two type of penalties that you can be eligible for not filing at all. The first thing is, if you don't file and the tax authority asks you to file, then they can give you a penalty of 10% of your total transaction, not even your income, just your transactions you have in your account. So if you put money like $60,000, $100,000 in your account and you didn't file, they can give you just the penalty of a $10,000 penalty. That's not even a tax, that's just the penalty itself. The second thing is, if you don't file, you're not basically showing the assets that, as we talked earlier, that you have to tell what the assets of you have. Now in Colombia, it's criminal to not file if your assets that you have are worth more than, for this year, 1.3 billion Colombian pesos. It's something close to $450,000. If you have $450,000 in assets or more and you don't file, you can be charged criminally for that omission right there.
What happens if you're a tax resident and you're over the $15,000 or whatever? Some people might be thinking, hey, what happens if I just don't file at all? Can the tax authority, the DIAN in Colombia, look at all my international income and come and chase me?
So yeah, I do get that question a lot. I would just have to say that right now the DIAN, they're sharing information with a lot of countries. Like, if you're a US citizen, Australian citizen, I'm pretty sure if you come here and open an account, they're gonna make you file these forms where they ask you for your foreign country tax ID. That is because Colombia and those countries have agreements to share information. So just a warning, just some people haven't filed because they think maybe nothing's gonna happen. But I would just warn you that that can change anytime. Our government is sharing more information with others, and technology is getting more sophisticated for us to improve. So as in right now, I understand that, yeah, a lot of people maybe say, let's see what happens. But I would just say that's kind of taking a risk there.
So guys, if you need any help with your tax planning or filing your taxes, or even asking some more questions about tax, then just check the link in the description. There you can fill out your needs, and Mauricio or someone from his team from Nexo Legal will be in touch to discuss further.